Commissioner Banks, your appointment is fascinating and motivating and exciting. Even my father, this joke won't go over because most of the people won't know, but my dad said that your running HRA is like Earl Weaver running the Umpires Association. And so not everybody laughed, but Earl Weaver is the guy that gave all the umpires a hard time when he was the manager of the Baltimore Orioles. In any case, so I was thinking about how to start with you, and this is what I found out. In 1992, this ran in the New York Times. It said, there are now about 5,400 families in the city shelter system, the highest number ever, 1992. As the shelters have become more crowded, families applying for help have packed up in the city offices known as emergency assistance centers. Steve Banks, coordinating lawyer for the Legal Aid Society's Homeless Family Rights Project, sounds like a cool title, which asked the judge for the contempt finding, said the backup had been largely caused by a reduction in permanent housing that the city offers to homeless families. And then, not surprisingly, the Times headline in January read, litigant against social welfare agency will be its leader. Pretty cool. So you run the agencies that is at the center of thinking about poverty in New York City. Every meeting I go to, somebody says, well, let's see what Steve Banks thinks. You're on every task force that thinks about poverty. I guess the question centrally is, atmospherically, having been the watchdog of this city for 20 years, and now being the champion of poor New Yorkers, what do you think you're inheriting as both sort of philosophically in terms of what the homeless system tries to do, but then what are your levers that you're most interested in pulling at HRA to support Commissioner Taylor in the city?
Well, that's quite an introduction. Maybe I should leave now.
Yeah. Or turn your cap around and start screaming.
Kick sand on the home plate. Obviously, I have the advantage in running HRA from the perspective of representing clients for 33 years. And I have a very good sense of the problems that clients encounter with the various city systems. One of the problems that clients encounter for their interactions with the city systems and all systems, frankly, of government, is this sense of alphabet soup of different agencies, HRA, DHS. And one of the things that I think is so important that the current administration is focused on is, for example, the partnership between HRA and DHS. And one of the first things that we did at HRA was we wanted to see what the link was between the policies at HRA and the growth in the shelter system, if any, at DHS. And so what we found, and for some of you, and I know Councilmember Levin presided over an oversight hearing in which we presented this data, but it's nonetheless important to know because it is actually a baseline that you start with, and that is that 1 out of every 10 people that HRA either closes their case or implements a sanction ended up on a shelter application at DHS. Mm-hmm. And if you look at it the other way, so you could say, okay, so from a policy perspective, when we talk about case closings and sanctions, we have to look for that 1 out of 10. There are issues with the other 9, but in terms of preventing homelessness, we have to find that 1 out of 10. But when you look at it the other way, the numbers are even more concerning, because when you look at the entire applicant group at DHS, 23% of the applicants were previously involved with a case closing or a sanction. And if you look at the numbers of people that were known to HRA that had some involvement with HRA prior to applying for shelter, that's about 60% or so, 66%, I'm sorry, of the applicants for DHS shelter. But of those within the realm, that 23% translates into nearly 40% of all the people that were known to HRA who applied for DHS shelter had a case closing or a sanction. Mm-hmm. So what that really highlights for us in the administration, for me on the front lines as the HRA commissioner and our staff, is that we have a very important role in preventing homelessness in New York City, and that role is to evaluate each and every one of our policies and to see whether there is some link to homelessness in those policies as these numbers demonstrate. And associated with that is the key role that we have in employment. And also, as I testified before the City Council, our current programs result in 25%, 1 out of every 4 people whom we report has been connected to the workforce, they're returning within 12 months. And those figures were determined by looking at a full 12 months rather than some shorter periods of time that had been looked at previously. So those are important sort of markers of the challenges that we have before us at HRA. I appreciate your reference to my comments in 1992, which also highlights something that I'm acutely aware of, which is that this didn't happen overnight, either at HRA or DHS. And I appreciate Councilmember Levin's perspective, which is to look at how we're moving forward to begin to address what has accumulated over a number of years. That article, that coverage that you referenced, referenced a series of litigations in which someone by the name of Jeff Carpels, who many people in this room may recall, was asked by a judge, how do you comply with the right to shelter? And he said it was a combination of prevention, operating the shelter system, and permanent housing, just as Councilmember Levin said. And the problem is, frankly, to get to the place we've gotten out of whack on prevention, because HRA has been operating as if it's in a separate realm from DHS. And so the fact that we have a partnership between DHS and HRA means that we at HRA have to be accountable for looking at some of our policies. It's also important, I think, that the decision was made in the administration to consolidate all the eviction prevention programs at legal programs at HRA, because we have to view ourselves as on the front lines of preventing homelessness. And the more we can do on those front lines, we're going to have a greater impact on the numbers of people that are seeking shelter. Similarly, our employment programs, and many of you have heard us say this, we're in the process of reevaluating all of our employment programs as part of our biennial employment plan, which should be out in the next couple of weeks, either the end of the month or maybe at the beginning of the following month is what our goal is. And the one-size-fits-all approach to our employment programs is part of the driver of some of these case closings and sanctions, and it was one of the reasons why it was so important for us to change our position on four-year college, for example, to make that an option for our clients, and we need to focus on high school equivalency and a whole range of other things with the goal of reducing that 25% return rate from our so-called placements and our so-called programs. So the part of our role in all this is to maximize income that is available to our clients, and that's part of the issue in the general housing market. So we have at HRA a piece of the hallmarks or the markers of the homeless crisis, which is we run the HASA program and we run the domestic violence shelters. And in terms of the HASA program, a very important step was taken by the mayor and the governor to reinstitute the 30% rent cap, and that's going to provide a very significant protection for our HASA clients in terms of being able to afford their housing. And similarly, we took a look at the policy of limiting for certain clients only studios versus one bedrooms, and the real issue there is what's in the market and its cost. It's not the size of the apartment. And so we took another look at that, and we said to ourselves, you know what, it's really how much we're willing to pay, not the size of it, and that should help. And so a number of actions that we're taking in the regard to the people in the HRA run shelter systems will have some impact. And as we testified before the City Council, we're also looking at what can be done in terms of rents for people in our domestic violence shelter system, and ultimately, in terms of supported housing, everyone's familiar with the role that we have there in sort of administering how certain units are allocated. We have, I think, a remaining numbers of supported housing that we recently determined through an RFP process how to proceed with those. It's about 395 units. The numbers that I think both Commissioner Taylor and I look at, and Deputy Mayor Barras-Paley look at, is piecing together a number of different numbers to ultimately come up with the kinds of things you're looking for. which is to address the crisis. Again, there's two ways of addressing the crisis. One's the immediate issues that are being grappled with night to night, day to day, and then there's the other long-term issues. But HRA certainly has a very significant role in terms of our policy impacts on homelessness in the city.